My name is Michael, and I've been working in security for 15 years. In that time, I've worked in many places: night warehouses, luxury residential complexes, and even a large shopping mall. But the experience that stuck with me the most happened when I was working the night shift at the Meadowland Residential Tower on the outskirts of Chicago. The tower was 22 stories tall, built in the 1970s, and had a mediocre reputation. Most of its residents were young families, students, and elderly people living alone. I worked from 10 at night until 6 in the morning, and the shift was usually quiet. I'd sit in the small security room on the ground floor, monitor the 16 camera screens, and do a patrol of the hallways and underground parking lot every couple of hours. In my second week there, I noticed something strange in the elevator log. The tower had 2 main elevators, and next to them, a small service elevator used for moving furniture or in emergencies. Every night, between 2 and 3 in the morning, I'd see in the monitoring log that the service elevator would move from the 3rd basement floor to the 18th floor, then return immediately to the bottom. There was no record of anyone using a keycard to operate it. The elevator moved as if someone was pressing the buttons from the inside. At first, I thought it was an electrical fault. I reported it to the maintenance manager, a man named Robert in his 50s, who knew every corner of the tower. He said, "Don't worry, Michael. That elevator is old. Its wiring system is complex. Probably a glitch in the floor sensors." I believed him at first, but 3 days later, something happened that I couldn't explain. I was doing my usual patrol on the 7th floor, where an elderly woman named Margaret lived. She was very kind and would sometimes offer me coffee when I saw her early in the morning. That night, when I reached her apartment door, I heard the small elevator moving. I stopped and looked toward the elevator door at the end of the hallway. The indicator showed the elevator was coming up from the basement. It rose to the ground floor, then the 1st, then the 2nd, and so on, until it stopped at the 7th floor. The elevator door opened slowly, with that distinctive metallic sound of old elevators. I looked inside. It was completely empty. No one was there, but I felt something strange, a kind of presence. A shiver ran down my spine, but I ignored it, pressed the door close button, and continued my patrol. The next night, the same thing happened, but this time, the elevator stopped at the 7th floor and kept its door open for several minutes before closing and returning to the bottom. I noticed this happened every night around 2:45 in the morning. Residents started complaining about the elevator noise at night, telling me they heard its doors opening and closing in the middle of the night, even though no one was using it. On my 13th night there, something happened that turned my life upside down. I was sitting in the security room, watching the camera monitors. I noticed that the camera on the 18th floor showed something unusual. The service elevator door was open, and the hallway was dark because the emergency lighting on that floor had been broken for a week. I'd planned to report it to maintenance in the morning. But then I saw something moving in the hallway's darkness. At first, I thought it was shadows, but the image became clearer as it approached the camera. It was a woman in a long grey dress, her hair covering her face, walking slowly toward the elevator door. She entered the elevator and the door closed. I looked at the main elevator monitor and saw it begin to move downward. It went to the 7th floor and stopped. The door opened, remained open for about a minute, then closed and returned to the 18th floor. This scene repeated 3 times that night. The woman would get into the elevator from the 18th floor, go down to the 7th, stay there, then return. Each time, the camera captured her clearly. But when I checked the building's entry log, no woman was recorded entering the building at that time. Also, the keycard she used to call the elevator wasn't in the system. I grabbed my flashlight and decided to go up to the 18th floor myself. The elevator ride was long and silent. When the door opened, I felt an intense cold, even though the heating was working on all floors. The hallway was completely dark, except for a dim light coming from a window at the end overlooking the city. I walked slowly, checking the doors. All the apartments on this floor were closed. No light coming from under the doors, no sound. I reached the small elevator door. It was closed. I pressed the call button. The door opened, and it was empty. I felt temporary relief and decided to go back down. But when I turned to leave, I saw her. She was standing in front of one of the apartment doors, about 10 meters away from me. She didn't move, didn't look at me. She just stood there, facing the closed door. Her grey dress looked old, made of a fabric they don't use anymore. Her long black hair completely covered her face. I tried to speak, but my voice wouldn't come out. I felt my feet rooted to the spot. Then she began to move slowly, without making a sound, toward the elevator door. She passed by me, only an arm's length away. I smelled a strange odor, like earth and withered flowers. She entered the elevator and turned toward me just before the door closed. I saw her face for a brief moment. It was very pale, her eyes wide and black, her mouth slightly open as if she wanted to say something. Then the door closed and the elevator began to move. I returned to the security room trembling. I sat there for hours until morning, not leaving the room, not answering any calls. In the morning, I told Robert what I'd seen. He looked at me silently for a long time, then said, "I knew you'd encounter her sooner or later. I was hoping it wouldn't happen." He told me a woman had lived on the 18th floor 20 years ago, named Eleanor. She worked as a nurse at the nearby hospital and lived alone. One night, after a tiring night shift, she returned to the tower and accidentally took the service elevator instead of the main one. The elevator got stuck between the 7th and 18th floors, and she was trapped inside for hours. They didn't discover it until 3 days later, when a strange smell began to spread in the hallways. Eleanor died from hypothermia and suffocation in the small elevator. After that, residents on the 7th floor started hearing sounds at night and feeling her presence. Management tried many ways to expel her spirit, but she remained. Eventually, they decided to shut down the small elevator, but the residents objected because it was the only elevator suitable for moving furniture. So they let it run and learned to live with its nightly movements. I continued working in the tower for another 3 months. Every night, Eleanor would make her trip to the 7th floor and then return. I got used to it, but I never felt comfortable. On my last night there, before leaving the tower for good, I went up to the 18th floor and left a bouquet of white flowers in front of the elevator door. I said softly, "Rest in peace, Eleanor. You won't be forgotten." Since then, I've worked in other places. but I've never forgotten the sound of the elevator doors opening in the middle of the night. And whenever I ride an old elevator, I remember her pale face and black eyes, and I wonder, are there other souls trapped between the floors, searching for their way to peace? The Man Who Never Leaves. I'm Daniel. I served in the US Army for 8 years before working in security. After my discharge, I found it hard to adjust to civilian life. Quiet nights reminded me of guard duty in dangerous zones, and my heart would race at any sudden sound. An old friend advised me to work as a night guard in a quiet place, saying, "It'll suit you, Daniel. Darkness is your old friend." I got a job at the Fairmont Museum of Natural History in Vermont. It was a relatively small museum, but it housed a valuable collection of artifacts, especially from ancient civilizations. The work was simple. I'd arrive at the museum at 11 at night, take over from the evening guard, do a round of the 3 museum halls, then sit in the security room until morning. The rounds were repeated every 2 hours, and the museum's security logs showed no previous incidents. The first week was very quiet. I'd walk through the dark halls, surrounded by massive dinosaur skeletons and glass cases containing artifacts from Egypt, Greece, and Mesopotamia. The dim lighting gave the place a solemn atmosphere, but I got used to it quickly. On the 8th night, something strange happened. During my round in the main hall, I saw a man standing in front of the Egyptian artifacts case. He was tall, slender, wearing an old-fashioned black suit like those worn in the 1940s. His black hat was low on his forehead, and I could see grey hair peeking from underneath. I stopped immediately and raised my flashlight toward him. I said in a firm voice, "The museum is closed, sir. No one is allowed here after hours." The man didn't move. He stood there, hands behind his back, looking at the glass case. I approached cautiously, my heart pounding. When I was about 3 meters away, I felt an intense cold, as if I'd entered a freezer room. I said again, "Sir, you need to leave immediately." This time, he slowly turned toward me. I saw his face. He was a man in his 60s, his face pale as paper, his eyes blue but unblinking, a cold, strange stare. He didn't say a word, just looked at me, then turned back to the case. I felt genuine fear for the first time in years. I stepped back, raised my radio to call the main security center. But when I looked up from the device, the man was gone. I looked around in every direction, but he wasn't there. The hall was completely empty, and there was no nearby exit he could have left through without me hearing a door or footsteps. I thought I was imagining it. Maybe fatigue, maybe lack of sleep. I finished my round, feeling uneasy, but I saw nothing else that night. The next night, I saw him again. This time, he was in the Greek Artifacts Hall, standing in front of a small marble statue of a headless woman. He was doing the same thing, standing silently, staring at the piece. When I approached, he vanished as if he'd never been there. I started talking to my colleagues on other shifts. The day guard, Thomas, laughed when I asked about the man. He said, "I've worked here 10 years, Daniel. The museum has never been broken into. Maybe you were dreaming on your feet." But the evening guard, Clara, was different. When I described the man to her, her face changed. She said in a low voice, "You're describing Walter." Walter was the museum's old curator. He died here 25 years ago. I asked her what happened. She told me Walter had been the museum's curator for 30 years and was especially passionate about Egyptian artifacts. He'd spent most of his life studying the museum's Egyptian collection and dreamed of building a special wing for it. One day, during an evening walkthrough before closing, he suffered a massive heart attack in front of the Egyptian artifacts case. They found him in the morning, lying on the floor, his arms stretched out toward the case as if he'd been trying to reach it. Clara said, "Some guards said they'd seen him after his death. He appears at night sometimes, standing in front of the pieces he loved. But I never saw him personally. I thought it was just stories." In the following nights, I saw Walter repeatedly. I didn't fear him like I did at first. He'd appear in front of different cases, sometimes in the Egyptian hall, sometimes in the Greek hall. Once, I saw him standing in front of a small case, holding an ancient Roman gold ring. Each time he'd vanish when I got too close, leaving behind that cold air. But on the 21st night, things changed. I was sitting in the security room, reviewing the camera logs. I noticed the camera in the Egyptian hall showed something unusual. Walter was standing in front of the case as usual, but this time he seemed clearer than ever. His face was fully visible, his blue eyes looking directly at the camera as if he knew I was watching. Then he began to move. For the first time, Walter wasn't just standing still. He walked slowly toward the camera and looked at it from very close. I saw his lips moving as if he was saying something, but the camera didn't capture sound. I tried to read his lips, but I couldn't understand. Then I heard a sound from the hall. It wasn't an ordinary sound. It was the sound of footsteps on the old wooden floor. I left the security room slowly, my flashlight in hand, my electric stun gun in its holster on my hip. I headed toward the Egyptian hall, the sounds getting louder as I approached. When I entered the hall, I saw the Egyptian case was open. Its heavy glass door was wide open. I froze. These cases were secured with complex electronic locks that could only be opened with special cards held only by the museum director and the head curator. I approached the case cautiously and looked inside. All the pieces were in place, except one. A small bronze statue of an Egyptian goddess that I hadn't noticed before, even though I'd seen the case hundreds of times. Its spot was empty, as if someone had just taken it. I looked around quickly and saw him. Walter was standing at the end of the hall, the small statue in his hands. He was looking at it with great affection, like a father looking at his child. I walked toward him slowly and said in a calm voice, "Walter, put the statue back. You know this isn't its place." He looked at me with his unblinking blue eyes, and for the first time, I saw something like sadness in them. He opened his mouth and spoke in a faint, hoarse voice, as if coming from far away. My work was not finished. I promised to protect them. I am not done. I said, "Your time is over, Walter. The pieces are safe. The museum is fine. You can rest now." He shook his head slowly. "No, not yet. The new piece. It's not safe. You must know." I looked at the small statue in his hand. It was strange. I'd never seen it in the museum before. I said, "What piece? What is this?" He said, even more faintly, "It came last week, from illegal excavations. It carries an ancient curse. It must not stay here." Suddenly, Walter vanished. He and the statue disappeared together. The place was empty and cold. I closed the glass case door and returned to the security room trembling. I called the museum director, Dr. Harrison, early that morning and told him everything. Dr. Harrison was a rational man, but when he heard the words "small bronze statue," he was silent for a long time. He said, "Daniel, did you see the statue? Did you touch it?" I said, "No, I didn't touch it. It was in Walter's hand when he disappeared." He sighed deeply. He said, "Last week, we received a new collection of pieces from another museum, including a small bronze statue of an unknown goddess. I hadn't catalogued it yet. It was in the temporary storage room. When I went to check on it this morning, I found it was gone. I asked, 'What do you mean by an ancient curse?' He said, 'The piece comes from an undocumented tomb in Upper Egypt. It's said to have belonged to a high priest of the 21st dynasty and carried protective rituals for the tomb. Anyone who tries to move it from its place without the proper rituals brings bad luck. I think Walter was trying to protect the museum from this piece. We never found the statue." A week later, Dr. Harrison cancelled the acquisition deal from that source and returned everything he'd received. He told me he felt a strange relief after getting rid of those pieces. As for Walter, I never saw him again after that night. On every nightly patrol, I'd pass by the Egyptian case, stop for a moment, and say to myself, "The museum is safe, Walter. You can rest now." I think he heard me, because the cold that used to inhabit the Egyptian hall every night disappeared completely the next day. I'm Daniel. I don't work at the museum anymore, but I visit sometimes as a visitor. When I pass by the Egyptian case, I remember Walter and wonder, how many souls guard the places they loved, unable to leave until they're sure everything is all right? And how many of us would do the same if we were in their place? I was born in Quebec, Canada, but I've lived in Montreal for 20 years. After losing my job at the transport company, I had to work in security to support my family. Jobs were available, but the pay was modest and the hours long. I accepted a position at an old office building in downtown Montreal, the Saint-Jacques building, which dated back to 1925. The building is 12 stories tall, with a heavy grey stone facade and massive bronze doors that give an impression of grandeur and age. It housed law offices and consulting firms, but most had moved to newer buildings, leaving only 3 small companies and a municipal training center. My work was simple: monitor the security cameras, ensure all offices were locked, and do night patrols of the floors. The building was very quiet after 7 in the evening. I'd arrive at 10 at night and stay until 7 in the morning. At first, I found this job comfortable, despite the occasional boredom. But after 2 weeks, I started noticing something strange in the elevator. The building has only 2 elevators, one small and rarely used. The main elevator was partially glass, with mirrors on 3 sides of the cab. One night, as I was going up to the top floor for my patrol, I looked into the mirror in front of me and saw my reflection, of course, but I saw something else. In the far corner of the mirror, behind my reflection, I saw a man standing. He was wearing an old military uniform, maybe from World War I or II. His cap was on his head, his arms at his sides. I quickly looked behind me, but the elevator was empty. I looked back at the mirror, and the man was still there, looking directly at me. I pressed the button for the nearest floor, which was the third, and rushed out. I ran down the long hallway until I reached the emergency stairs and hurried down to the ground floor. I sat in the security room panting, trying to process what I'd seen. In the following days, I used only the stairs. I refused to take the elevator no matter what. I'd climb the stairs every 2 hours, from the ground floor to the 12th and back down. It was tiring, but it was better than facing that face in the mirror. On the 10th night, something happened that changed my mind. I was sitting in the security room, watching the camera monitors. I noticed the camera on the 8th floor showed the main elevator door open. The elevator was stopped there, its door open, the hallway dark. I waited minutes, but the door didn't close. I had to go up and see why. I climbed the stairs to the 8th floor and stepped into the hallway. The light was dim, and the elevator door was still open. I approached slowly and looked inside. It was empty, but the mirrors reflected the hallway behind me. Then I saw him. In the mirror facing me, I saw the military man standing right behind me. I spun around quickly, but no one was there. I looked back at the mirror, and he was still there, standing behind me, his face very close to my shoulder. I felt his cold breath on my neck. I ran to the stairs, not looking back. That night, I didn't leave the security room until morning. I started researching the building's history. I went to the city archives and read about the Saint-Jacques building. I discovered it had originally been a luxury hotel in the 1920s, then was converted into a military headquarters during World War II. Canadian forces used it as a liaison officer's quarters between 1942 and 1945. I spoke with the day guard, Pierre, an old man who had worked in the building for 40 years. When I told him about the military man in the mirror, he didn't seem surprised. He said, "You've seen the lieutenant. Don't worry, he doesn't harm anyone." I asked who the lieutenant was. Pierre told me a young officer named Lieutenant Henri Dubois had worked in the building during the war. He was responsible for communications between Canadian and British forces. One night, after a long shift, he took the elevator. Pierre said, "They found him in the morning, dead in the elevator. He'd had a heart attack. He was only 27. His face was reflected in the 3 mirrors, as if he was looking at himself from every angle. After that, guards said they'd see him sometimes in the mirrors, especially in the elevator. He doesn't always appear, but when he does, he's standing behind whoever's looking, watching them silently." I asked Pierre, did he ever do anything to any guard? He shook his head. "No, just watches. I think he's still guarding the place. He was very devoted to the army. Always said he'd stay at his post even after the war ended. Seems he took his word seriously." In the following nights, I tried to ignore it. I always used the stairs and avoided looking in mirrors if I had to take the elevator. But on the 15th night, something unexpected happened. I was in the security room, listening to the radio reports of a coming snowstorm in Montreal. It was 3 in the morning, and the wind was howling outside the building. Suddenly, the power went out. Everything stopped. The cameras, the lights, the alarms. The security room was pitch black. I grabbed my flashlight and opened the door. The main hallway was completely dark, nothing moving. Then I heard the elevator. The main elevator was moving despite the power outage. I heard its motors working, the metal doors creaking. I went out to the elevator lobby and raised my flashlight toward the indicator. The elevator was going up from the ground floor to the 8th. It stopped on the 8th floor. Then I heard another sound. Footsteps moving on the upper floor. A heavy sound, like military boots on a concrete floor. I don't know what drove me, but I decided to go up. I climbed the stairs quickly, my flashlight lighting my steps. When I reached the 8th floor, I opened the stairwell door cautiously. The hallway was dark, but I saw a faint light at its end. The light was coming from the open elevator door. I walked slowly toward the elevator, my heart pounding. When I reached the door, I looked inside. Lieutenant Henri Dubois was standing in the elevator, but this time he wasn't in the mirror. He was truly there, standing in front of me, just a few steps away. His military uniform was clean, neat, as if he'd just come from a parade. His face was young, his eyes warm brown, a slight smile on his lips. He looked at me and said in a calm voice, "Don't be afraid. I'm here to help you." I couldn't utter a word. I felt my feet rooted to the ground. He continued, "The storm will be severe. The building is old, and the power won't return until morning. There's a backup generator in the basement, but it doesn't start automatically. It must be activated manually. Go down there, you'll find a red switch on the right wall. Pull it." I stared at him, stunned. I asked in a shaky voice, Why are you helping me?" He smiled a sad smile. "Because this was my job, to protect this place and those in it. Even after I left the service, I couldn't let go of the responsibility. You're the guard of this building now, and I need you to be able to do your job." Then he vanished, as if he'd never been there. The elevator was empty, the 3 mirrors reflecting the dark hallway around me. I went down to the basement and found the backup generator as he'd described. The red switch was on the right wall, exactly as he'd said. I pulled it, heard the engine start, and the dim lights returned to the hallways. After that night, I was no longer afraid of Lieutenant Henri. I'd sometimes see him in the mirrors, especially in the elevator, and I'd nod to him in greeting, sometimes saying, "Good evening, Lieutenant." He'd appear for a moment and then vanish, as if reassuring himself that everything was okay. I continued working at the Saint-Jacques building for 2 years. On my last night there, before moving to another job, I went up to the 8th floor, entered the elevator deliberately, and looked into the 3 mirrors. I said clearly, "Thank you, Lieutenant. You're an honorable guard. This place is safe because of you." In the mirror opposite me, I saw him for a brief moment. He was standing beside me, looking at me and smiling. Then he vanished. When I left the building in the morning, I looked at its old stone facade and felt something strange. I felt I had never worked there alone. Someone had guarded the place before me and would remain there after me. I'm Victor. I still believe that some souls remain in the places they loved, serving even after their term of service has ended. And perhaps that's not so much a frightening thing as it is comforting. To know you're not alone in the dark, that someone is watching over you, even if they no longer belong to the living.